Good evening, everyone. This week's Parsha is Parshas Pinchas, Tafshin Pei Beis. And for what we're going to discuss tonight, we actually need to go back to last week's Parsha a little bit. Go back to the end of last week's Parsha. At the end of last week's Parsha, we have that after Bilam failed to curse the Jewish people 3 times, he instead decided to cause them to sin. And he convinced Balak, the king who had hired him to curse the Jewish people, to have the Moabite women seduce the Jewish men into worshiping idols, seduce the Jewish men and to get them to worship the idol of Par. And they succeeded. And the Jewish people became very attached to this idol Par. And because of that, God punished them with a plague. And they were people that were dying right and left. At the end of the day, 24,000 Jews died because of this plague. So Hashem says to Moshe, this is the end of last week's Parsha. This is Parak Chafei, chapter 25, verse 4, Pasuk Dalet, verse 4. Vayemer Hashem el Moshe. Hashem said to Moshe, Chachas kol Rashei ha'am, take all the heads of the nation, vayikal isam la'Hashem neged hashemesh, and hang them before God in broad daylight. Now, what this means, Rashi says, is the Rashei ha'am are the judges. Hashem tells Moshe, take judges. They should judge the worshipers. The worshipers should be stoned, as idol worshipers are done, and then hung, which is what happens to a person receives stoning. So Hashem tells Moshe, get the judges together and start judging these people. The Yashav Charnaf Hashem Yisrael, and through that, the anger of God will go away from the Jewish people. Vayemer Moshe al Shevta Yisrael. So Moshe said to the judges of Israel, Hirgu ish anoshav and espad Baal Par. Let each man kill his men who were attached to Baal Par. V'hinei, and behold, in the midst of all this, Ish mibnei Yisrael ba, a man from the Jewish people came. Vayakrev elech v'samidyanis. He brought a Midianite woman close to his brothers. He brought her near his brothers. Le'enei Moshe, in the eyes of Moshe, u'le'enei kol hadas b'nei Yisrael, in front of the entire assembly of the Jewish people. And they were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Now, what happened here is, and this becomes more clear in this week's Parsha, that this man was none other than Zimri ben Salu, who was the prince of the tribe of Shimon. And he took a Midianite woman, and he made it very publicly known to Moshe and to the other leaders and to everyone that he was going to cohabit with her and sin with her. And he did so. And when it says they were crying at the opening of the tent of meeting, which is the tabernacle, it means Moshe was crying. Didn't know what to do. Next, Vayar Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. Pinchas, the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron the Kohen, Aaron's grandson, saw what was going on. He arose from the midst of the assembly. And he took a spear in his hand. He followed the Israelite man into the tent. And he pierced them with the sword. He speared them, both of them. The Jewish man and the woman into her stomach. And the plague then was halted from upon the children of Israel. So everyone is crying, no one's doing anything, and Pinchas arises. He takes a spear, he kills them for doing a sin, and because of that, the plague stops. Now, Pinchas kills them because there is a concept that if someone cohabits with a non-Jewish woman, there is no capital punishment for that. But a zealot, a person who is truly zealous for the honor of God, can punish them, can kill them. And this is what he did. And when he did this, when he stood up for the honor of God, this is when the plague stopped. Then we have the beginning of this week's Parsha continues from there. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe lemar. Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, Pinchas, the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron the Kohen, Heshivas chamasim al bnei Yisrael. He removed my anger from upon the Jewish people. When he avenged my honor amongst them, And I didn't destroy the Jewish people in my anger. Therefore say, behold, I'm giving to him my covenant of peace. There shall be for him and for his children after him a covenant of kuna, of being Kohanim forever. Because he stood up for the honor of God, and he atoned for the Jewish people. So Hashem testifies, or Hashem announces that he approves and rewards Pinchas for what he did. Pinchas, actually, as it says, Hashem says he and his children shall have the covenant of kahuna. He was the grandson of Aaron. Wasn't he a Kohen already? And Rashi explains he wasn't a Kohen because when Aaron was appointed to be the Kohen, at that point of time, Pinchas was already born. And when Hashem made Aaron and his sons Kohanim, he made Aaron and his sons Kohanim and any children born from then on, not the ones born before. Pinchas was born before. He was left out. But now, because of the fact that he had done what he did to stand up for the honor of God, he was rewarded that he became a Kohen too. Okay. Rashi also comments in this week's Parsha that that the Jewish people were not happy with Pinchas' actions. It's true that he had stopped the plague with what he did, but it bothered them that Pinchas found it within himself to kill a prince of the tribe of the Jewish people. If you're a prince of the tribe of Jewish people, you have to have been a great person. Apparently, Zimri went wrong, but he was a great person. Not only that, the commentaries say, we're not going to get into it right now, that he had a reason for what he was doing. He wasn't just succumbing to his temptations. He had a plan in what he was doing. He had an intention. He was trying to save the Jewish people in what he did. He thought what he did because someone other saved the Jewish people. I'm not going to get into it right now. But he had his reasons for it. And the Jewish people were questioning if Pinchas' motivation for what he did was truly sincere. God testifies, I gave him my covenant of peace. He's okay. He was fine. He did exactly what he was supposed to do, and he was sincere, and he was genuine. Okay. Now, let's go back a little bit and try to understand a little bit the context of what Pinchas, or the environment that Pinchas was in when he decided to do the act that he did. So we read before that Hashem says to Moshe, take the heads of the people, take the judges, and have them judge the idolaters. Now, it's not that the Jewish people didn't have a court system. And the law is that when someone commits a sin that deserves punishment in a rabbinical court, such as one like idol worship, so there have to be witnesses. The witnesses have to warn them not to do it. If they do it anyway, the witnesses bring them. And therefore, and that's what was supposed to have been happening. What does Hashem have to tell Moshe? Take judges to judge. It should be happening. There are idol worshipers. There are witnesses. The witnesses should be bringing the idol worshipers. Why is Hashem telling Moshe, take judges? Isn't there something isn't there a system already in place? So Reb Shamash and Rafal Hirsch explains, sure there was a system in place, but no one was doing anything. No one was bringing the idol worshipers to justice, to judgment. They were worshiping idols. They were succumbing to the temptations of the Moabite women. They were getting them to worship the idols, and no one was doing anything. So Hashem had to tell Moshe, get the judges together. We're going to have to deal with this in a different way. We can't deal with it in a typical way. We're going to have to deal with it in a different way. We're going to have to deal with the situation at hand to punish them without that. So Pinchas is in a situation where, at best, people are apathetic, or they just, for some reason, can't find it in themselves to do anything about it. Then Zimri, the prince of the tribe of Shimon, gets up. And he does an unbelievable thing, but he's a prince of the Jewish people. Pinchas, on the other hand, who's Pinchas at this point of time? Have we ever heard of him? Maybe we have his name somewhere when we go through the lineage. But we don't find him in any position of leadership in the Jewish people. And as the commentaries point out, any leadership position of the Jewish people mentioned in the Torah means that that person is of a high spiritual stature. That's why he has that position. So if Pinchas has no position amongst the Jewish people, that means he's not from the greatest of the people. There are people greater than him. He's not from the greatest people of the generation, seemingly. And Moshe's not doing anything. No one's doing anything. And Pinchas somehow or another found it within himself to be the one person who's going to stand up and do what has to be done. How did he do that? How did he find it within himself to do that? What was he thinking when he looks around and no one's doing anything? And what has to be is that Pinchas realized, what has to be is that Pinchas realized that there will be situations where an individual who sees the truth and is sincere has the right to be the one and perhaps the only one who will stand up for Hashem's honor. That's the way it has to be sometimes. He understood that sometimes there's got to be the one person who's going to get up and do something. In Pirkei Avos, in Chapters of Our Fathers, we read, "Uv'makom she'ein anoshim," literally translated means, in a place where there are no men, "Hishtadlu li'osish," put in the effort to be the man. If no one's being a leader, you be the leader. If no one is taking action, you take action. That's what Pinchas understood. At the same time, okay, so we see from Pinchas that there is sometimes a person's got to be the one to do it. But how do you know you're right? If no one else is doing it, how do you know you're right? Especially if you see people greater than you that aren't doing anything. So if we look at Pinchas, we get one answer to this question. Because Rashi tells us in last week's Parsha, where it says, Vayar Pinchas saw. So Rashi comments, citing the Talmud and Sanhedrin, Ra Ma'asav Niskar Halacha. He saw what happened and he remembered the halacha, he remembered the law. Omar Eloi Moshe. He said to his teacher Moshe, V'kublani mimcha, I have received from you, Haboya Larametz Kanoim Paigim Bay. One who cohabits with a non-Jewish woman, zealous people, can punish them. So Pinchas says to Moshe, I learned from you that something should be done here. Omaloi, Moshe said to him, Krayana da agarta iuleve pravanka. Let him who reads the letter be the agent for executing it. You have brought it up, you do it. So Pinchas, before he did, he asked. Now, there are commentaries that ask that if you are a kanoi, if you're a true zealot for the honor of God, then you shouldn't be asking any questions. If you're a zealot, and again, a serious, sincere person who is zealous for the honor of God, and you're going to do this kind of action, it's not something you stop and you wonder and you go ask a shayla, ask a question about it. You know you're supposed to react on your own because you truly feel the desecration of God's honor. And if you don't feel that, and if you don't react that way, you don't have a right to do it. So the question, how did Pinchas go to Moshe and ask? But I believe the answer, at least one answer given is that Pinchas was ready to do it, but he saw Moshe's not doing it. He was expecting Moshe to do it. He was expecting Moshe to be that kanoi, that zealot for the honor of God. And therefore, he had to ask Moshe. And he went to Moshe, I learned from you, kanoi and pogim boy. I learned from you something's supposed to happen here. No. Why aren't you doing it? So Moshe would have said back to him, no, you do it. You brought it up. For whatever reason that Moshe was not doing it and no one was doing anything, if you brought it up, do it. It's your mitzvah. And Pinchas did it. So there may be times where we feel we should be the individual. We're not sure. Ask. Ask. Ask your rabbi, ask your teacher, ask your mentor. Ask. Because when you ask, you'll get the answer. Even the person who may not be the one who's that individual that's going to get up and do it for whatever reason, that person can still give you the advice that, yes, this is the way to go. And don't worry about everybody else. And then there are times where you know you're right. Even though no one is doing what should be done, you know you're right. And I'll give you an example. The story is told of Harav Yitzchak Zev Soloveitchik. He was the rabbi of the city of Brisk. Brisk is the Yiddish, it was the Yiddish, the Jewish name for the city, but it's known as Breslotovsk. And the rabbi of that city, this is before the war, was Rabbi Yitzchak Zev Soloveitchik, or Soloveitchik from Boston's uncle. And the story goes that in the main synagogue in Brisk, they had a chazan, they had a cantor, they had a choir. Whether they had it only for Shana Yom Kippur, every Shabbos, but for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, they for sure had it. And the Gabayim decided they want to institute something new. Instead of the choir being next to the chazan, they're going to put the chazan up. They're going to put the choir above the chazan on a balcony. That means that there was this, I guess, some kind of a balcony platform that had steps going up. And that is why it was there, what it existed for. Otherwise, I'm not sure. But it was there. And the Gabayim decided they're putting the choir up there. And Rabbi Soloveitchik didn't like that. It didn't have the right feeling. It was a break in tradition. It was similar to what probably, Reform Judaism had instituted. Perhaps it was done in other places of worship. But it clearly was against tradition, and it smacked of some going against Jewish tradition. And when he heard about it, he went to the Gabayim. He argued with them that it should not be done, and they didn't budge. They were doing it anyway. And Rabbi Soloveitchik even considered not going to shul on Rosh Hashanah because of that. And the last minute, he decided he's got to go and do something. So he comes to shul. Chazan is where he is. The choir is up on this balcony. And he had to go up steps to get to the balcony. And the Rav climbed up the steps to get to the choir, which was seemingly a bit of a job. Brisker Rav, the Rabbi Soloveitchik, known as the Brisker Rav, was not the healthiest of people. But he went up the steps and he told the choir, you have to go down. The rabbi says, we have to go down. We go down. So the choir went down. Rabbi Soloveitchik went down. But waiting for the choir at the end of on the steps where on the other side where they were coming down, were the Gabayim who said, get back up there. So the choir went back up there. With Soloveitchik, so they went back up. So again, he climbed up the steps to them. Not sure why he had to call it the steps, but that's the way the story goes. He went up the steps, told them to go back down. They went back down, and the Gabayim told them, go back up. So they went back up. And this kept going on back and forth, back and forth. And for Rabbi Soloveitchik, this was already becoming something that was just draining him of all his strength. He didn't have the strength to keep arguing, to keep going up and down the steps. Couldn't do it. He was about to give up when he decided he's going to give it one more shot. And he went up the steps. He told them to go down. The choir went down. As the Gabayim were ready to order the choir to go back up, all of a sudden from the ladies section, from the ladies' balcony, there were ladies screaming down at the Gabayim, how dare you defy the rabbi? How dare you have the chutzpah to do this? And once they started screaming from the balcony, a whole tumult arose in the shul, and the whole thing was done. And the choir came down and remained down. So who saved the Brisker Rav that day? Who saved the rabbi? The ladies in the balcony. This story probably took place close to 100 years ago. And the women in that balcony could have very well said, None of the men are doing anything about this. My husband's not doing anything about it. Other dignitaries of the synagogue, other officers of the synagogue, whatever we're going to call it, aren't doing anything about it. So who are we to do it? But they understood very well what was the right thing here. They knew the right thing was that no matter if no one else was doing anything about it, they finally decided they have to do something about it. And they saved the day. Sometimes you just know this is right. That what's going on is wrong. No one's doing anything about it. I know they're wrong. I know what the right thing is. And I'm ready to do it. That was Pinchas. Pinchas found the courage to do it. And he saved the Jewish people. And that's a lesson of Pinchas. That there, as Pirkei Avos says, b'makom she'ein ish, where there's no men, there's no leaders, there's no people doing anything, you be the one to do it. And even if you're an individual and the environment around you is not cooperating, it's not the environment is not conducive to that. Nonetheless, Pinchas told us, find that strength, find that courage, and be that one that will have the merit of being the one person to stand up for Hashem. Now, I want to share with you, again, following this theme, I'm going to read to you, if you don't mind, a drasha, a sermon, given by a Rabbi Moshe Swift. Rabbi Swift was born in 1907 in England, and after receiving his smicha in the Lithuanian yeshivas, he came back to England and he had a rabbinic career in England, in Johannesburg, in Los Angeles, then eventually came back to London, where he was a member of the London Bezdin, the London Rabbinical Court. And he was rabbi in England, seems shortly after the war, in a time when Orthodox Judaism was not in a very strong place. And he has a sermon, and there's a collection of his sermons called Mareshes Moshe. And for Parshas Pinchas week's Parsha, he has the following sermon. And it's the same idea that we said, but it's very beautiful. He puts it out, he lays it out in a very beautiful way and teaches us another lesson for this. So he begins, and it's really a medrash. The story is told of the old man was planting a seed so that a fruit tree might one day sprout and blossom. When he was called a fool because he was so old and feeble that he would never benefit from his work, his answer was, mine is a long-term policy. The children of the future will benefit from my toil and labors, just as I have benefited from the toil and labor of my fathers and ancestors. The things that we do as an investment for the future. So Rabbi Swift continues, after the loss of so many of our people in the war, there is an especial need today to look to the future with a long-term policy. Our youth must be imbued with the zeal and will to fill the great void in our congregations by recapturing, with youthful vigor and enthusiasm, the love of Jewish learning and the joy of Jewish living. This is what happened with Pinchas. He was a young man standing in the midst of the whole congregation of Israel. All the elders and the leaders, none of them moved when they saw a forbidden thing committed in the camp, an immoral deed that caused the profanation of God's name and the blackening of the name of Israel. Everyone stood by, afraid to move, but Pinchas, the grandson of Aaron, could rest no longer. He rose courageously, and in the presence of all Israel took the part of God, of the Jew, of the Torah, and did away with the wicked man and woman who had committed such a crime. It was a long-term policy, or as we call it, an investment for the future. His reward was not immediate, but rather, or it was immediate plus. It shall be unto him and to his children afterwards a covenant of everlasting priesthood. What Pinchas did was something that gained reward and merit for himself and for all his generations. What he did was an investment for the future. Out of the children of Pinchas, the world was blessed with great and pious men. It was courage that did it. And it is this courage that we must train ourselves to possess. Now the examples he gives are relevant for all times, and especially the time that he was in. Some of them are more relevant for his times. Although some may be against us, we have to stand firm. Without courage, the Jew can achieve very little. Without courage, the Jew can achieve very little. Courage to daven in Hebrew when others only pray in English. Courage to keep Shabbos when everyone else doesn't care. Courage to say, I am not going out playing on Sunday morning because I have to attend classes. Courage to do the things that so many neglect and not to do the wrong things that so many others do. Courage to be a true Jew and win the war against wrongdoing. This is our duty. Like Pinchas, we will be playing our part in winning God's covenant of peace and happiness for our community and for humanity. Pinchas showed us that courage is an investment for the future because it brought kahuna, merit, for himself and all for all his generations. And from his generations came out great people who enlightened the Jewish people, a way for the Jewish people. That all came about because of his courage. And we need to find the courage to be courageous Jews, whatever situation, generation we find ourselves in. And that will be an investment for our future, for our family, for our descendants. It'll bring merit for us and for them. That's a true investment. Okay, one last thing I want to mention. It's in a similar vein. Actually, in this week's Parsha, different idea. Torah talks about how Moshe asks Hashem to appoint a leader for the Jewish people. Hashem tells Moshe it's time for you to pass on, and Moshe asks appoint a new leader. The new leader that's appointed is his disciple Joshua. And Hashem tells Moshe to bring Joshua in front of the Jewish people, and he should put his hands upon him, and he shall charge him in front of the Jewish people. And alav, you shall put from your glory upon him, which Rashi says means that we know that when Moshe came down from Mount Sinai the second time, his face was radiating with a spiritual light, and he was to give some of that light to Yeshua. And the Talmud Rashi brings down, Moshe's face was like the sun, Yeshua's face was like the moon. So Moshe's disciple Yeshua was the one who took over the leadership. Now, Rabbi Yisrael Reisman points out that in the whole Torah, we only find two interactions between Moshe and his disciple Yeshua. It does tell us that Yeshua never left the tent of Moshe, but when it comes to interactions, discussions, there's only two of them in the Torah. And they share a common denominator. The first time is that after the Jewish people, Moshe was on Mount Sinai, receiving the tablets, receiving the Torah. The Jewish people were sitting by the golden calf. Moshe comes down from Mount Sinai. He's not yet amongst the camp. Who does he meet waiting for him? Yeshua. And Yeshua says, it sounds like there's a battle, there's a war going on in the camp. And Moshe says it's not a war. It's the sound of sinning. And Rashi points out that Moshe points out to Yeshua that, a leader has to make sure that he hears things correctly. So Yeshua says it's one thing, and Moshe says, no, it's not that. The next time we have a conversation, Moshe and Yeshua, is in Parshas Baloscha, when Moshe says to Hashem he can't carry the load alone. And Hashem tells him there are 70 men who will now be his assistants. And those men are to join Moshe at the Mishkan, at the tabernacle. Moshe will receive prophecy, and then that prophecy will go on to these other 70 men, and that's how they'll be initiated into their leadership position. There were 2 men who were supposed to join the 70 who did not join them. They remained at home. And when the prophecy came down, the prophecy came to them while they were in their tents. When Yeshua heard about this, Yeshua turned to Moshe and he was very displeased. I'm not going to get into what the problem was. He was very displeased. And according to some, he wanted Moshe to actually punish them with death because it was what they were doing in some way. Yeshua saw that as not of disgracing the honor of Moshe. Others say he should put them in jail. And Moshe says, no, I don't have a problem that they're prophets. If only everybody would be a prophet, I'd be fine. So Yeshua says they're doing wrong. Moshe says, no, they're okay. So of the two interactions that we have between Moshe and Yeshua, it's not about Moshe patting him on the back. It's not about Moshe. Well, actually, we know that Hashem tells Moshe to tell Yeshua to fight a war against Amalek. But as the conversation goes, we don't hear any conversation between them. We don't even know it. It says Moshe charges Yeshua. What did he say to him? It doesn't say exactly what he said. But the two conversations that we know are where Moshe tells Yeshua, you're incorrect. And Rishon Reisman explains that many point out that what we see from here, if this is what we see, the interaction between Moshe and a student, if this is interaction between the Rebbe and Talmud, the teacher and student, the mentor and student, of the ultimate mentor and his student who took over from him, if we see that the only thing mentioned was basically the teacher correcting the student, then that shows us that a true student is a student that's ready to be corrected and ready to build on that correction. Yes, a teacher has to know how to strengthen his students, build up his students. But what are the main points? What are the main, if not the main, what are the main results that have to come from the relationship between a teacher and a student? Has to be one in which the Rebbe directs the student in the right path. He's not afraid to do that. And that the student is ready to accept that correction and get on the right path. Accept the correction, accept the criticism, and build upon it. That is what a true student is. And that's what Yeshua was. And he merited to be the one that would take over for Moshe and lead the Jewish people. Have a wonderful evening.